Not coming? Oh, he's just hitting that switch, I think. Testing? He's just working on it back there. You know what? He's trying to print them. The, and these photocopiers, they don't always read the slides really well, so you have to print them in a certain way. And so he's going to try another. Otherwise, they go black or white, or so. Hopefully he's printing some or trying. I'll just go back there. Okay. Not wanting to cooperate.
Well, you know what? I really don't know how to operate all this stuff, but I thought I had everything already.
Yeah.
Experience everything.
Yeah.
It is on.
Yeah. I've
But you can
testing.
see that it's coming through here. But
Testing.
I'm moving a little bit here. But what other switch?
That wouldn't be this cord here.
It is plugged in.
Yeah, no, everything is good. It's all wireless, right? So
Everything
Mine's turned on.
what else?
I just don't know much about sound systems, so I am not much help at all.
That's the problem. That cable on that end.
Yeah, I'll double check it, but I think it's all good here.
Yeah, it's right in there.
Testing. I'm gonna try this here. I don't know if this is the sound or not. Sometimes one of my plugins is a little bit touchy.
It
I don't think that's not the sound, though, is it?
Difference from the two, I don't think.
No, I don't. Yeah, because one of them, it won't always work. One of my
Oh, okay.
um, connectors there, but okay. I'm just trying to get the sound working. It's not. Is it working now? No. Well, maybe what I'll do is let's just start as he works on the sound, and I'll just try to speak loud enough that you can hear me, and if hopefully we can get it working. I'll just take this off until we. Just let me know. All right. Well, good morning. We can get started. So this is our wind-up day, and thank you very much for just being great class that we can get together like this, and I've appreciated it very much, and I hope as we wind it up that we'll just wrap up a few things or talk about some things I think are pretty important stuff for us to talk about. Let me test it here. Should I just keep this on? Okay. All right, we'll do this. Okay, let's pray together. If you've been paying attention to the news, I haven't watched it that closely, but the stuff that's happened in Turkey and Syria, that earthquake has certainly caused some incredible devastation and many, many deaths. So let's pray, and we'll remember the people who are in this season as well. Dear Lord, thank you for this day, and I thank you for another morning that we can come together and study. I pray that this will be beneficial to each of us as we seek to honor you through the way that we lead people, and as we learn these things, that they will go into our hearts and come out as application that just is honoring to you in how we do this. So we ask your blessing on the class today. I particularly want to pray for the tragedy and the devastation that's happened in Turkey and Syria. So many people dead, so many people wounded and left homeless. And in this season, we pray, Lord, that you will be with the people, and in this moment that they would turn to you and find their trust in you in this time where everything is falling apart literally for them. And so we commit them into your caring hands. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right, well, so a quick review again, like I try to do what I hope is the reinforcement of key things. One thing I should have talked about much more specifically, and I just added to this. Oh, before I go on, my slide numbers aren't going to not match up with all yours, because as I'm going along, so I should have added this in here. So I'm adding, picking stuff, so it kind of gets off kilter of your numbers. But you shouldn't have too much trouble finding where we're tracking. But when I put the review in, I usually add it after the fact. So just so you're wondering where the numbers are, they won't be exactly as you have it in your handouts. But one of the things a Christian leader must be characterized by a strong prayer life. It's an assumption I think you almost have to make, but boy, we need to take that seriously. And that we are prayer warriors. And that prayer is a priority as we do the things that God has called us to do. So just a statement there. We talked about team building yesterday, living the body of Christ, enjoying the diversity of the body, enjoying the fact that we're so different, and yet God designed us to complement one another, not to put one above the other, but just to see it all meshes together into something that is beautiful when it's working well. And then we delved into a little bit why communication is essential for a healthy team. And I think we all, pretty sure if I read you right in your comments, it's hard to do good communication well. But let's work hard at it. And hopefully we get it right most of the time. We won't get it right all the time, I don't think, being realistic, but we should get it right most of the time in how we communicate with our team, with the people that we care for are leading. We talked about the foundational footstool, again, just to just keep reminding us of that, the need for our character to be honoring to God, that our agenda is God's agenda, and we keep seeking and asking God, are we doing what you've called us to do? Not what I want to do, what you want us to do. Because I think we can deviate without thinking, right? Not realizing maybe deviating to things that are just something I want to get done. And our motive is just that God, no matter what happens, whether people notice or not, doesn't matter, as long as you're pleased and you get the glory. Such a freeing place to be. The key verses from Matthew, and this is just some of them, there's more of course, but key ones from Matthew 20, Philippians 2, and Matthew 23. We talked about the theology of leadership, how our view of God impacts how we live and lead people. And I would just encourage you, and I speak to myself, of course, that we do ponder it in our day-to-day thinking as we read the Word of God, how big God is. Let's remind ourselves, and if we start thinking more of ourselves than we ought, boy, does that ever diminish it. And do we ever feel small when we see the majesty and the immensity of God that we can't even comprehend? And again, all this to me gives us freedom. It just frees us of all our hang-ups when we want to make it about self and we release it to Him. We talked about servant leadership in action and how Jesus modeled it, picking up the towel of service, that we are people who serve, and we're taking initiative, we're involved. We take action, we're not passive. We're active people as leaders. That differentiates people, and they see things that other people often don't see. I tell you a quick little story about this. I was listening to a speaker once, and he'd been at a big conference, and there was different things going on. One was part of it was there were people there for a leadership side, there's people for other things. And so as a part of an experiment for the leaders, of course, people didn't know what was going on. Somebody scattered garbage around the dining hall, and to see who would notice the garbage and who wouldn't. And usually the sign of a leader, and we'll talk about that later, but you have the panoramic, you try to see a bigger view than just your belly button. And and the leaders, they more naturally will pick up that stuff. They'll see it, or others won't notice it. So I decided to try this in one of my classes. And I even put money in one and said, "Thank you for picking this up." And so they came into the classroom. The classroom was all clean, been cleaned by the day before. They were starting fresh that morning. And I had my spies that I said, "Okay, you watch for me. Let's see what people do." So I put this garbage around. So the first guy that comes in is our student body president. And he just right away, and he starts picking up all the garbage. So he proved exactly. So I said, "Okay, stop now. You're ruining my illustration. You're proving it, but you're ruining it." It was fine. It was just exactly the point, is he saw it right away and did something about it. I think that distinguishes. Well then, as the start come to end, that same one paper, the guy came and sat. He saw the paper on the floor, picks it up, looks at it, throws it back on the ground and sits down. Well, there was more than lack of leadership there. That's like, come on, irresponsible. Even a leader, non-leader, should know how to do that one. But it's taking action, it's initiative. That's a big part of this, right? Of leadership. Leading through sacrifice, leadership comes at a cost. When we invest in the brokenness of people's lives, it's going to come at a sacrifice and it's going to hurt. But if we're not willing to do that, we're not going to make a difference. We just won't. And so we need to.
As you were sharing that story, it reminds me of our deacon, Dave Nickel. And he worked at a cabinet shop, and they had, hired a new guy. And he would always leave a mess. He wasn't clean up, after. So Dave ponders a little bit and says, he threw a broom across the hallway. And a good employee would pick it up. And this guy just stepped right over it. But that's very true what you're saying.
Yeah, why? So we need to be alert, right? If you're going to lead people, you've got to pick up on stuff like this. I mean, we're not going to pick up on everything, let's face it, but we should pick up on things like this and be alert to this bigger picture than just, having our noses crazy glued to our belly buttons. So then, so through sacrifice, it comes at a cost, and then equipping those he led. We have the goal to equip those around us, to help them to grow in their faith. That's what servant leadership is. Take my influence, my position that God's given to me, to help those who I'm caring for and leading to grow in their faith and draw closer to Him. And it's through all kinds of ways that as we interact with them, some of it's correction, some of it's just encouragement, some of it's all this, and it's just come on, I think. So, this is Jesus modeling for us. When I talk about takeaway stuff, this is kind of, if you don't remember much about this class, I hope you remember this, and that this will sink deep. And then we talk about leadership qualities, that the person must be spiritually mature, must be spirit-filled, and give evidence of godly character and integrity. And we talked about, and you came up with lots of good questions, how you'd fish that out of people, to find out where they're tracking if you're interviewing somebody or wanting to find somebody, especially for a spiritual leadership position. So that's a bit of a review. Any comments or things that you'd want to add to or comment on here? Okay, we're going to jump ahead. We did some of this yesterday. I'm going to go ahead a bit here. So what defines a healthy team? And again, I would just ask you as I read through these things and I maybe comment a bit, just ask, how is this looking in your setting? Number one, they have a universal and governing goal. They know the vision. I think if your team knows everybody's aiming in the same direction and they believe it, they're committed to it, you're in a good place. If people don't know where they're heading or they don't know why they're there, you know, the tensions can grow because people are struggling. What's the point of all this? Why am I here? And so it's up to the leader to make sure everybody knows the vision, where we're heading, what we're trying to accomplish. And I think that helps to create that healthy feeling. They're interdependent and know they cannot do it alone. This one is so critical that we don't think we can just lone wolf it and I can do my own thing. Sorry, that was kind of a play on words there. So it's lone wolfing. I wasn't actually planning to play on somebody's last name here. Sorry. Okay.
That's right. That is still true, though.
Yes. Yeah, so that idea, I can do it myself. Oh, I don't know how many meetings I've gone into where either whether it's the leadership team or a bigger staff meeting and we're working on something that's pretty important. I think we've got this figured out, but I learned to just don't finalize until people have spoken into it. And then you realize the gems of wisdom can come not only from the people you work with, say, on your leadership team, but the staff. And how many times, oh man, I never thought of that. What a gift. And I think that interdependence, and if you recognize it and value it, it strengthens the team. And when a person says, man, I got the answers to everything, it's going to be my way or the highway, oh, you want to mess up your team. That's the way to do it, I think. Unified in spirit and effort, and then, of course, honor each team member's contribution. That, to me, is a good diagnostic of how your team is doing these things here. Anything to add to this, or does this make sense, or do you want to add there's something that's missing from this? Okay. Oops, wrong button. It's critical, I believe this really strongly, that it's critical to be well organized. If you're going to lead well, you can't be a disorganized person. Now, some people are better than others. Some people are so extreme that they get so caught up in the organization they forget that there's people involved. So you have to find that balance, right? But just be well organized, well planned, and not haphazard as much as possible. And then put trust in the people you lead. And this is something like, when I'm gone lots from campus, and we have our school out there. Steve Jansen's the director out there, and Peter Bueller's in Winnipeg, and I've got guys at Pamburn. And this is just the truth. I don't think about what's going on campus when I leave. I just don't. I care about it, but it's like, oh, I hope they're keeping things together. I don't have to do that at all. God has just blessed us with this richness of good leaders. And I just say, Lord, thank you. But I have to trust them, and they know I trust them. But I just do because they're trustworthy. And when we don't trust the people that we're leading to do the job, you just create this tension and uncertainty. Will I ever get it right? And you have to sometimes just let people fail. In my earlier years, and I had to learn this the hard way, I'd ask somebody to do something, and then I'd be watching, see if they're getting it done. And I'm not sure, is this going to get done or not? And then I kind of had in my mind how it should be done. And then they would get it done, and they would do it differently than I thought it should be done, and it was way better. And it took a while to say, just relax, because I'd want to step in a little too quickly sometimes, say, make sure. And there was times I had to push people, but I started to realize, just let these people do their thing. They have better ideas than I do. Why do I think it has to be my way? And anyway, so that's it, and it provides guidance and safety for the team when you trust them. and you got that buy-in and care. You know what FOMO is? It's kind of a social media thing, fear of missing out. And some people really live with that fear. They want to know everything that's going on. I like the other side of it. It's JOMO, which is the joy of missing out. I hope I don't know. I don't need to know. Thank you. There's some things I need to know, of course. But I enjoy not knowing everything. I think that's the balancing act. But we kind of joke about that because some people they're just wired to have to know everything. And I find myself more on the other side. I think you have to be careful with both of them. All right, some essential common ground in the team. Here's some things just some thoughts that I think are really important. Understand the difference between personality quirks, uniqueness, and character flaws. So when you look at your team, you look at your people that you get to work with, and we joke about this in our team, says, man, we are a weird bunch. We're so quirky, you know? And we laugh about it. By the way, can I just say this? Humor should be a part of leadership, and just enjoy. There should be lots of laughter when you're together. Because you get to the serious stuff, you'll get to the serious stuff, but also enjoy laughing together. But we have to laugh at each other. But sometimes we have to say, man, that's just a personality quirk. It's not a moral issue, it's not something they're doing bad. They just have a quirk about them that can naturally rub them the wrong way. And we just have to appreciate that and know it's okay. But when it turns into a flaw, then you have to confront it. Does that make sense? Do you ever find yourself facing that kind of scenario? Because everybody's quirky to somebody else, they're probably seeing something in you that's quirky and saying, man, what is wrong with that guy? Okay, we must have generous tolerance to these things. We must choose our battlegrounds well. This, I believe, is really important. Is that there's just some things not worth quibbling about or losing sleep over. But you have to pick your battles well, and then those battles, you go after them if they're important. But lots of little things just don't matter. In the big picture, they don't matter. So just let them go. You know, behavior that falls outside that hinders acceptable team unity, that's where you have to, as a leader, hone in and deal with it. Of course, understanding the levels of leadership and allowing people to function where they can serve is really important, because when you realize that this person is really detailed, and you have to be respectful of that desire to know and make sure it's done, that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, let's respect that. But then they in turn have to respect the person who is going to barge ahead more aggressively, and all in between. Any comments on this? Please add if you have something to add, because I know there's a wealth of experience here, and if you have something to add to this, please do. I'm going to keep going if you don't say anything, but developing healthy teams. So we talked about that with that leadership handout, that leadership quadrant. Again, just another tool that you can use. Just to reiterate with that one, make sure that you talk to people about their gifts. You talk about it collectively so you understand each other and enjoy what they bring to the table, so that when it surfaces in discussions, that you don't get annoyed by it, but you actually say, man, I'm glad that voice is being heard. But it requires generosity across the table to everybody. So here's a case study. You're finding yourself frequently in tension with someone on your team. It doesn't seem to be a character issue, but more a lack of understanding who this person is. Utilizing the principles of the leadership quadrant, how might you address and bring understanding to your team? So I don't think we'll get into groups. I think I'll just open it up. How do you address a question? This is such a common situation, I think. So what do we do with that?
On the last part of this sentence here, how might you address and bring understanding to the team? It's communication, explain.
Yeah.
Talk about it, bring it to the surface, and dialogue.
Yeah, I really think that's the key, is just talk about it. But don't ignore it and hope it goes away. I mean, if it's just a little quirk, you say, you know what, we just have to ignore that. It's not that big a deal. But if it's creating tension, then you have to talk about it, I believe, to get it corrected. Otherwise you'll.
When you mentioned the four quadrants
Yeah,
of who you tend to be,
yeah,
great help to understand what our tendencies are to be
yeah,
able to have more tolerance for each other.
yeah,
And,
It is amazing how much grace we are willing to give once we kind of have a bit of an understanding of why this person is reacting the way they are.
hmm yeah, yeah, and just figure out where it's bad behavior, and where it's just they're kind of wired to, some people are just more outspoken, some are really quiet, some may push on different things, and if there's a graciousness there, you can put up with a lot, and just realize it's okay because there's a consideration for each person on the team. But I don't think you can deal with this unless you talk about it. If you hope it goes away, forget it. It's not going to happen unless the person is unbelievably self-aware and realizes I'm really annoying people right now, which we should be watching for too, because we can do that. And you start watching the body language, and man, they're tuning out me right now, or they're starting to write and do other things because they're not listening anyway. Yeah, that's a good.
My wife, or even in leadership of whatever sort it is, employee relationship and so on. Um, I'm generally a person that, you know what, let's go ahead. Then you have others that, no, 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 what about all the details? Let's think through it, what are the consequences if we do this or that? And my wife needs lots of time to think. And I've thought it through before I even ask the question or explain what I
Yeah.
wanted to do. Um, this personality thing,
Hmm.
to try and understand that. We did that with Daryl Taylor on the disc chart thing there,
Yeah.
You kind of categorize each person where you are,
Yeah.
and then realize, oh, this guy needs lots of time to think.
Yeah.
And I don't.
It's good insight. Yeah. Yeah, and I think sometimes the leadership, especially if you're the point leader, are aware of stuff that the others actually haven't had a chance to process or to think about. And so give them a chance to think about it before you jump in too quickly. And if you're aggressive or you're a driver, it's easy to bypass that step. And then you're picking up pieces that you don't need to be picking up.
But the naysayers, like Peter just mentioned, the naysayers, they slow us down,
Mhm.
make us think.
Yeah.
When we built the senior home at Lodge in town, we had a naysayer on the board. Boy, was that frustrating, but he made us think.
Yeah.
And he was president, I was chair. That's how it is. We had to think. But it's
But it's good though.
the
Yeah.
upbringing brings
Yeah.
value, but once you get
Yeah.
used to this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
the naysayers pick up on their feet. It's good.
Yeah. And the naysayer though should know they can't be continuously a naysayer. Otherwise, eventually it'll just get it to. But you know that they just pick up on stuff, right? That others may miss. So, yeah. Thank you, Peter.
You made reference to communication. What I find interesting is that there are people that very much operate on the need to know, and they always want to be one up on the rest of the group. And so, well, that doesn't look like you. And that does not build a good team confidence when you're like that. It's amazing how many people think that.
Yeah, and I think people like that have to be careful. Why do you want to know so much? And so it's kind of wired in them, but you can take that to the point where it becomes very, very disunifying. If you're just driven, I just got to know, because that's actually probably driven by selfishness, honestly. And so, while it's okay to a point, everything has its extreme, right? And if you're the kind of person, I don't care what I know, I don't need to know anything, well, you're probably going to get yourself in pretty serious trouble if you don't know anything. So you have, there's somewhere there's these healthy range of balance on all these gifts, these dreams, these way people behave. So, somebody, yeah.
I guess that I come back to a point that you made. We're looking at a scenario discern between a character quality or personality versus bad behavior.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's a hard call to make.
Mhm.
And it's very difficult to bring it up and have a conversation with someone and say, you are behaving badly.
Yeah.
And ground God of leadership.
And I think we're gonna watch a video in just a couple minutes here, but those levels of relationship we have in leadership really determine how quickly you can talk to somebody about things. Because the further on your relationship, your voice is going to be easier to bring in if you see an issue. But when you're at the ground level, you're just getting to know the person. You just got to be okay. You know what? This person doesn't actually know me that well, and I have to be okay. And so you have to treat each one differently. But it is. Oh, hey, you know what we need to do with this? We need to pray, pray, and pray for wisdom to know how to navigate through it, because we just lack wisdom. But if we ask, it says in James, without doubting, God will give us wisdom. And let's not doubt when we say, Lord, I just don't know what to do about this, but you help me, because we need you desperately. So I think a healthy team, understanding empowers. Growing in understanding must be intentional, and it never just happens that we figure each other out. Have a godly love, a generous and kind heart to people who are different than us, and that is critical to unity and joy. So Maxwell has these things, and we'll watch that right now. Are you familiar with John Maxwell at all? A little bit, yeah. So I mean, he's kind of, he's kind of a guru on.
For 30 years I've been teaching this, and
Just wait. On leadership, and I mean, he's a Christian man. I think he actually does some really good stuff, but. Some people say, well, I'm a disciple of John Maxwell. I think that's a little bit of a stretch, but he honestly has some good stuff to offer, and it's well thought through, and his company does that. I mean, they help people understand some of the depth of leadership. And this particular one I found particularly interesting because when we're in leadership, the way he describes it, I think you'll be relate to all the levels that he talks about, depending on where you live. And I mean, I think he's largely targeting a secular crowd here, but he's a Christian man, and he has some good stuff. He comes from a Christian perspective, absolutely. So let's try this out, and it's about what is it? Yeah, it's about 28 minutes long, or 27 minutes long here. I think you'll enjoy
this
this.
for West Point and Microsoft and Lilly and Delta and the largest organizations and companies in the world come and say,
okay?
John, teach the 5 levels of leadership, because they understand that if you and I today in these few minutes can understand how leadership works, and by the way, leadership's not a noun, it's a verb. It's action, it's moving. And if we can understand how to go from level 1 to level 2 to level 3 to level 4 to up to level 5 in our leadership, we expand our leadership, we expand our influence, and we expand our effectiveness. So I'm ready to go. I know you're ready to go. Okay, here we go. Level 1, we're going to start at the very bottom level. This is where you start. This is where we all start. The bottom level is the position level. At level number 1, this is where we all start. We all start with a title. We all start with a job description. We all start with a position. Okay? And the key word at level number 1, the key word is rights, R-I-G-H-T-S, rights. In other words, people at level number 1 follow you because they have to. In other words, you're the boss, or you have a title, or you're the supervisor, and anybody that's under that person, they just basically follow that person. Now, this is the beginning of all of our leadership journey. We get a leadership position. In fact, people will come to me all the time. They'll say, John, I just became a leader last week. And when they tell me they became a leader last week, I know what they meant. They really didn't become a leader last week. What they really did is they got a leadership position last week. And by the way, the position doesn't make you a leader. I know a lot of people who have a position of leadership, but they're not a good leader. You know that too. You probably worked with them before. So the position doesn't make you a leader, but if you're a good leader, you can really make the position. But it's where we all begin. Now, the upside of level 1 is simple. It's a place where you and I get to shape and define our leadership. We get a leadership job, we become a supervisor, and now we begin to work on ourselves as a leader, and we begin to define who we are. That's kind of the upside. Now let me give you the downside of level number 1. The downside of level number 1 is the people who follow you will give you the least amount of their energy and effort. In other words, if they're following you because they have to follow you, if they're following you because that's what they've got to do to get their paycheck, if they're following you because that's you have the position over them, if that's the case, they will always give you the very least of their time and of their ability and of their effort and of their mind. People don't like to have to follow people because they have to follow people. And this is a great mistake that people that have positional leadership make. They think, well, I've got the title, I've got the position, so now everybody will follow me. Well, they're following you, but they're only following you many times if you're not a good leader because they have to. It's the only way that they can get paid. Just think of this. Level number 1 is where you're going to get the very least of people's energy, effort, and mind. Let me tell you, I've seen it many times when I've gone to work with companies on leadership. You can always tell a level 1 leadership company or a level number 1 leadership culture. You can always tell it because, let's say quitting time is quitting time's at 5 o'clock. In level 1 positional type companies, if quitting time is at 5 o'clock, guess what? At 4:30, everybody is clearing the desk. Oh yeah, they're moving stuff out of the way because it's only 30 minutes until the highlight of their day. And so they're already starting the countdown. So they're clearing their desks because they want nothing to impede their progress when they leave the building. So they've got at 4:30 the desk starts getting cleared. At 4:45 they get away from the desk and they go around and they go to the different cubicles and they're saying their goodbyes. And they're saying, boy, it was great to be with you today and had a good time and see you tomorrow. And they're doing all that kind of stuff because, again, at 5 o'clock, the big time, at 5 o'clock, they don't want to have to be encumbered by doing relationship stuff. They want to do that on company time. You understand that. At 4:50, they're going to the restroom. Of course. You want to be sure to pee on company time. Of course, so they're over there in the restaurant. They're just okay. Now they've got that. At 4:55, they're back at their desk and they're changing shoes. They're changing their shoes. They're getting on track shoes. They're getting on. They got to get something because at 4:57 they are in a starting position. They are counting down. And at 5 o'clock. Everybody's gone. I mean, you say, what do you mean everybody's gone? Everybody's gone. At 5 o'clock, they're all gone. I mean, you look around the office and they're gone. In fact, they're gone so fast it startles you. And you run over to the window to look out in the parking lot, and you're totally shocked. All the cars are gone. And you ask yourself, how could people leave a building so fast without a fire drill? Let me explain. In positional companies, when people come and park in the morning, they're very careful how they park. They back their car. Yeah. They back their car in because they know at quitting time they want to be able to get a fast escape because now they're on their time. And I can promise you, you show me a positional company, a positional culture. You show me leaders that are positional in their thinking, and I will promise you every time, not all the time, every time, those people will constantly wonder, why am I not getting the best out of my people? Well, you're not getting the best out of your people because the only reason that people are following you is because you got a title. And they're going to give you very little energy. Now, the good news is you don't have to stay at level number 1. You can go to level number 2. So let's go to level number 2 as quickly as we can. The first level is the positional level. The key word there is rights. I get certain rights, so you got to follow me. Level number 2 is the permission level. And at the permission level, the key word is relationships. And at this level, people now begin to follow you because they want to. Now, there's a world of difference between following somebody because you have to and following somebody because you want to. Now, what happened between levels 1 and 2? Well, what's happened is you've connected with your people. You've not only connected with them, but relationally, they like you and you like them, and you've got to know each other. And so now in this work environment, They're not following you just because you are a supervisor. They're following you because you do have a position. You are a supervisor, but you are a supervisor that people like. And I'm always amazed. Aren't you amazed? I'm always amazed at people that have leadership positions or responsibilities, and they're not likable. Do you know what I mean? They're just not likable. People don't care for them. It's tough being in the people business and not having people like you. It's tough. In fact, sometimes I see them and I just want to sit down with them and say, my name is John and I'm your friend. And I just want you to know, people don't like you. How many, oh come on, let's just have some fun. How many of you have ever had somebody how many of you ever had somebody you worked for that you just didn't like? And no, wait, that was close. Let me qualify this for you. Not in your present job situation. You understand? No. I know that is not happening where you are now. You are happy. But how many of you in another job at another time on another planet? Come on. All right, come on. How many of you ever had somebody you had to follow and they just weren't like, let's see the hands. Come on, let's get those hands. Yeah, absolutely. All right, there you are. All right, let me ask the real question. How many of you are seated beside that person right now? Relationships with people are the foundation of leadership. You build your leadership off of relationships. Why? Because leadership is influence. And you cannot influence somebody that you antagonize. And every one of us know what it's like to have somebody, that we, that's hard to like. Well, let me ask it this way. How many of you have ever been in a grocery store and you looked over about 3 aisles and you saw somebody you didn't want to see? And how many of you ever done? And the good news is, the bad news is you saw somebody you didn't want to see. The good news is they didn't see you. How many of you ever done this number? Hid from somebody. Now, on level number 2, what happens is you begin to develop relationship skills. And let me describe the leader on level 2. The leader on level 2, they have 3 things that they do extremely well to be a relational leader. One is they listen well. In fact, they take all of their leadership cues from walking slowly through the crowd and listening. They listen well. Secondly, they observe. They're conscious about where their people are and what their people are doing, and they're constantly observing them. And thirdly, they're learning. They're learning. And then in the process of listening, observing, and learning, they have an attitude of servanthood. They know how to serve. And they not only know how to serve, but they do serve. And they not only do serve, but they love to serve. One of the things that I love about Chick-fil-A, I live in Florida now, and so when I went down there, I began to talk to Chick-fil-A. People said, come on, you got to get a whole bunch of Chick-fil-A's down in my area because I lived in Atlanta and I need my Chick-fil-A fix, and they're starting to come down, and it's wonderful. But can I tell you what I love about Chick-fil-A? They have a servant culture. Level number 2, they got that wired. They've got this relationship stuff wired. It's my pleasure. How can I serve you? It's a mindset. It's a culture. And if you're going to grow as a leader, you have to grow beyond your position, beyond your title. Yes, you have a position. That's level 1. But the second level is relationships and the ability to get along with people. That's level 2. Let's go to level number 3. There's another level higher. The third level is the production level. The key word there is results. And at this level, you're starting to help the bottom line of the company. You're starting to, quote, bring home the bacon. At this level, you become effective as a leader. And you become effective as a leader on level number 3 because you produce. And the characteristics of leaders at level number 3 are very common. One is they produce by example. In other words, they are the example for the other people that follow them how to be effective and how to be productive. You see, the greatest motivational principle in the world is that people do what people see. And too many travel agents, they're like, or too many leaders are like travel agents. They're sending people where they've never been themselves. And you want to be a tour guide. You want to take people with you. You want to say, this is the area where I've been, this is where I live, this is the area where I lead, come along and follow me. And at level number 3, your leadership begins to gain credibility because now you are fleshing out for the people around you and you are modeling for them things that they want to see, and you are starting to produce. Which something else happens, because you're becoming productive in your own life, you begin to attract people that begin to be productive also. In the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership that I wrote, one of the laws is the law of magnetism, and the law of magnetism just says we attract who we are, not who we want. So when I talk to leaders, often when we talk about recruiting, then I'll say, well, what kind of people do you want in your company? What kind of people do you want in your department as a supervisor? And they'll give me a list. They'll write things, I want somebody that's self-disciplined, and I want somebody that is service-oriented, and they'll give me a list of 4 or 5 qualities. And as soon as they give me the list, I look at those qualities, and then I ask them a very simple question. I say, okay, do you possess those qualities? Because see, on level number 3, basically who you are as a leader is who you attract on your team. And at level number 2, or level number 3, what is wonderful is that at level number 3, when you start to produce, when you start to really develop, when you really start to grow things, you begin to get momentum. And momentum is a leader's best friend because momentum is the great exaggerator. And once you have momentum, all of a sudden things begin to look in such a better way, and it becomes easier to grow, and it becomes easier to lead. It's a wonderful thing. In fact, level number 3 is where a lot of the problem solving is taken care of. You see, managers, they try to solve problems where leaders try to create momentum, because leaders know that if they create momentum, they'll solve 80% of their problems with momentum. You see, momentum is a problem solver. Lack of momentum is a problem stopper every time. A train going 55 miles an hour on a track, if you had a 5-foot thick concrete steel reinforced wall on the track in front of that train, because that train is going and has momentum going 55 miles an hour, that train would smash through that wall and would just keep on going. Why? Because it has momentum. Momentum allowed it to get through a 5-foot thick concrete steel reinforced problem. That's what momentum does. That same train, not moving at all, stopped dead on the track. No momentum. If you put a 1-inch block in front of the driving wheels of that train, just a 1-inch block, that train can't even get started. Now, isn't it interesting? Same train that smashed through a 5-foot thick concrete steel reinforced wall because it had momentum, that same train without momentum can't even get going with a 1-inch block, can't even get going. It has no momentum. In fact, that's why I tell people many times that when they look at the problems they have in their organization, your problem is not your problem. The problem is they think the problem is the problem, and so therefore they concentrate on a problem that's not a problem, and now that the problem it isn't a problem has become a problem, not because it was a problem, but the problem was they didn't know it wasn't a problem, and so now they're concentrating on a problem that wasn't a problem, and now they've got a problem not because they had a problem, but the problem has become a problem because they didn't know that it wasn't a problem, and so they got a problem. And momentum and level 3 leadership will take care of 80% of all the problems in an organization. It happens for sports, it happens for business, it happens in government. Momentum is a leader's best friend. It happens at level number 3. You got to get to level number 3 to get that mo going. Okay, let's go to level number 4. Let me ask you a question before we go to level number 4. Are you learning something? Are you learning something? Okay, look at your neighbor and say, I'm learning something. Go ahead and tell them that. Go ahead and tell them that. I'm learning something. Look back at your neighbor and say, not enough yet. You've still got 2 levels to go. You're not there yet. You're not there yet. Level number 4 is the people development level. This is what I live for. This is what I strive for. This is what excites me. Something magical happens when you begin to understand the most appreciable asset you have in any organization is the people of that organization. And you begin to commit yourself to developing the people within that organization, because how do you grow a company? You grow a company by growing people. And when you grow them, they increase their capacity. When they increase their capacity, they begin to increase the capacity of what you can do and what you can accomplish. Let me just share with you quickly 3 thoughts on developing people, just very quickly. Number 1 is the key to developing leaders, and the key to developing good people is in recruitment. The better person you bring in the door, the higher odds that you can do well with them. I remember having lunch one time with Lou Holtz, and Lou Holtz said, John, I've had bad players on my football team, and I've had good players on my football team. And he said, just to be honest with you, I'm a better coach with good players. Of course he is. Of course he is. Let me say something. 80% of your success of equipping people to be successful is in the front door on who you bring in. I wish I had time to develop that for you, because what happens is, unless you and I have a clear picture of what we're looking for, we don't know when we see it. Happens all the time. People come to me and say, John, I'm looking for some leaders for my company. What do you suggest? The first question I ask is, what does the leader look like? Give me the characteristics, give me the qualities. Please paint a picture for me. What does that leader look like? Because you've got to have that clear picture so that when you see that person, you know that they're one that you want. Recruitment is key. Number 2 is positioning. The ability not only to bring the right person in the front door, but also to put him in the right places. Collins would say, get him on the bus, get him on the right seat. And position is huge. And what I've discovered is that successful people have always positioned themselves well. When you see a successful person, they're successful because what they have done is they've found their strength zone and they've found their niche, and they stay right in that sweet spot, and they just work that sweet spot. You've never heard anybody be in an interview that was successful that you came up and you interviewed them and they said, well, the secret of my success is that I've never discovered what I was good at. Or the secret of my success is I've always worked on, I've just worked in my weakness. No, they're always in their strength. They've already discovered what they're good at. Now, successful people have discovered what they're good at. Successful leaders discover what other people are good at. Successful people position themselves well. Successful leader position the other people well. And at level number 4, that's exactly what happened. The leader is always looking at the people, observing, watching. Just like last week, I went back to my first school. I graduated from Ohio Christian University in a little town in Circleville, Ohio, and it's a little school, and I go back every year and I give them a day to speak, and they get all the proceeds and keep the money. And so because I grew up in that town, I told one of my friends that played ball with me, Tim, I said, Tim, let the ball players, let the team know, let some of my high school kids know that I'm going to be in town, and let's have a dinner afterwards. And we had over 50 people came together. I hadn't seen many of my high school mates since I graduated from high school, clear back in 1965. And we had a wonderful time. We laughed and talked and told stories for 2 hours. And Coach Neff, our basketball coach, he came back. Hadn't seen him for years. And when I saw him, I thought of myself, and I thought of back in those scrimmages in basketball, because the first scrimmage every year, Coach Neff would take the first team, and he'd say, now I'm going to let you play the second team, but there's one condition. The first team is not going to play their position. And he'd take Doug Roth, who was 6'8", and put him out at point guard. I remember he stuck me one year under center, and he put all the first team players out of position on offense, but he let the second team play in their position. And the second team always beat us in the scrimmage. Why'd they always beat us? Because, and then he would stop and he'd say, let me just explain something to you. No matter how talented you are, if you're out of position, you'll never reach your potential. What was Coach Neff teaching us? He was coaching us, and he was teaching us that it's key to get positionally correct. And it's also, as a leader, key to get your people in the right position. And at level number 4, that's what happens. At level number 4, you recruit well, you position well, and then you equip well. Now you take them and say, okay, I understand what their strength zone is. I understand what their giftedness is. Now I'm going to equip them. I'm going to come alongside of them, and I'm going to develop them, and I'm going to train them. And I use a very simple for years, for many, many years, a simple 5-step equipping process. It really works. Step 1, I do it. It's that simple. You can't teach somebody what you can't do yourself. We may teach what we know, but we reproduce what we are. So if you're going to reproduce yourself, you got to be it yourself. So the first step is I do it. Step 2 is I do it and you're with me. I take you with me. Now we're going to spend time together. I'm going to be your mentor. I'm going to be your coach. You're going to watch me. You're going to observe me. You're going to see me in different situations. We're going to make sure that it works. We're going to make you're going to be able to ask me questions. Step 3 is now we turn it, and I hand the ball off to you. Now on step 3, you do it. You do it, and I'm with you. Now I'm watching you, and I'm tweaking you, and I'm helping you to get better, and I'm just really fine tuning you. Step 4 is you do it. You just do it. You don't need me anymore. You know how to do it. And you do it, and you do it well. And many times people think that equipping stops at step 4, but it doesn't. There's one more step that's absolutely essential. Step 5 is you do it, and somebody's with you. You've never really trained and equipped somebody until they can multiply themselves. That's where all compounding is. That's where all compounding of time, money, influence, the whole process. Compounding begins when you can train somebody who has trained somebody. I know that well because 14 years ago, I started a nonprofit organization called Equip that is now the largest leadership organization in the world, and we've trained and equipped over 3 million people in 154 countries. And the key to that is we don't train anybody unless they make a commitment to train somebody else. It has to continue to go on. That's level number 4. It's a beautiful level to be on. It's the level where you develop people. Now there's one more level. That's level number 5. The pinnacle level. The pinnacle level, the key word there is respect. You've done it so well with so many for so long that people just absolutely follow you. They follow you because of who you are, the qualities you have in your life. They follow you because of what you have done. And there's a great amount of respect. And it takes a long time to get to level number 5. Most of us aren't there. All of us would probably like to be there, but it's a lifelong journey. And what I want you to understand about the 5 levels is that's exactly what leadership is. Leadership is an always ongoing, always learning, growing process. Okay, let me ask you a question. You've got the 5 levels there, and you can see them, and you can see how each one kind of leads into the next one. And probably the question you've asked yourself now by this time, because you're a sharp crowd, you've asked yourself, wonder what level I'm on. Am I on level 1, or am I on level 3? Am I on level 4? You've already done that. I know you have. That's what I would be doing if I'd be sitting there. I'd be saying, okay, where are you, Maxwell? And if you ask that question and you kind of go deep in that question, you're going to get a little frustrated because you know what you're going to discover? You're going to discover that you're not on the same level with everybody. That with somebody, you're maybe on level 2. With somebody else, you may be on level 4. Isn't that true? If somebody new came in the company, you're on level 1 with them. And what you're going to discover is that you're on different levels with different people. Now, I wish I had an hour to teach this whole process, but here's what I want you to understand. Here's your assignment, very simple. Take the people that you lead, put their names down, and ask yourself a simple question. What level am I on with that person? Do your best to kind of put a number there, and I know it can kind of bleed together, so it's not quite an exact science, but do your best shot, because after you know what level you're on with each one of your people, then you're going to know specifically how to lead them. Now here's the key. Whenever you try to cast vision with people in your organization, in your department, they don't see you based upon who you are as a person or as a leader. They see you through the 5 levels grid. And a person on level 1, when you talk about a vision, a person on level 1 sees you entirely different than a person on level number 4. The commitment level is much higher the higher you go with your people. So therefore, when you cast a vision or when you lay it out for your people and say, this is where we want to go, just understand it may be the same company, it may be in the same building, it may be the same time, it may be the same speech, but the reactions are going to be different. And the reactions are going to be different because they're on different levels with you. So take the notes, study them, Apply them to your life. Begin to be a student of the 5 loaves of leadership. And I wish you well, because leadership is influence. Always has been, always will be. And within you, you have the power to increase that influence. God bless. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Well, what do you think? Some good food for thought? Yeah. I mean, there's parts of it that we may say, well, does it apply to all of us? But actually, the principles are actually very real. If you have been at these various stages. Anything that stands out to you before we take a break?
I was thinking of my brother John, who had a cabinet shop years ago, and he's not there anymore. And there's this time clock where his employees have to punch in when they start. And he said that some of them came in and punched the clock right away, then sat down and put on their shoes and tied their shoes. And he had told them, you tie your shoes first, and then you punch in the clock. And that's how it is.
I would expect that you can relate with a lot of the illustrations you use, like we're at the different levels. The thing that was as a good takeaway for me on this one, I think there's just good stuff to pay attention to in how you're developing people, how you're growing as a leader. But especially to remember that you're at different stages, different people. Because if you think you're going to be the same with all people, you just go, why am I struggling right now? Because I actually don't have that relationship yet with them. And think about it. I'm sure if we went through everyone, you could relate to those different stages where you're out with different people. But I think it's a noble goal. It's a God-honoring goal to think of the ultimate, like to get that place where you have established the kind of respect that people want to follow because of your example and testimony. So, okay, I hope that was a little bit helpful to you. Let's take a break and have some coffee, and then we'll keep going. I'm just going to wrap up the team building side with this. You actually have this as a resource in the back of your, just a separate sheet that pretty much is exactly this document, but I'll run through this quickly. It's sort of a good kind of a summary, I think, that helps building team well. So number one, value and honor the gifts of each person. Do not be threatened by their gifts and ability. Again, to me, this is a very significant place where a team is threatened when people do not honor or appreciate the gifts of others. Intentionally build relationships, spend time with people. Number three, exercise real care for the body and individuals in the body. And these are all, of course, leadership responsibilities. Good communication is essential. It shows people they are valued. Learn to be an active listener and a good listener. I think men, maybe I should speak myself, we can have selective hearing, especially when we're talking to our spouse. And she said, "Did you know what I said?" I think so. She could tell that vacant look in the eye. And so I have to learn to be an active listener. And boy, when you're dealing with people, to listen well has to be cultivated. Process well, allow proper steps in decision making, honor personality differences, trust people with what they've been given to do and to lead. Trust builds confidence and leads to creativity and innovation. That's one thing I've really discovered. Just get out of the way. When people are assigned, they know their job, and they know where we're heading. Just don't interfere with them. Let them do their thing. And we at Pamron, we have this group of facilities guys who are incredibly gifted, and we do about 98% of all our development of new buildings internally now. And so we could do things for a fraction of the price because of that. But I learned quite a while ago, they're so creative and they're very gifted in what they do. My job is, though I kind of enjoy that stuff, I just stay out of it. We did this big building project. I didn't have any input whatsoever into the building. I just said, I'm just looking forward to what you guys come up with because I know it's going to be good. And I'm going to be a cheerleader. I mean, I go raise funds for it. That's part of my job. But and there's just something about that. I learned that as you trust people, their creative side really gets rolling. But they have to also process that they stay within the parameters so they don't step out that could cause grief. So, and then number 10, each person needs to own the vision and see their part in its fulfillment. I think that's one of the leader's great tasks, is to make sure everybody knows where we're heading. That's the job of the leader, to ensure we're heading the same direction. So that's going to switch us now into vision. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I'll go fairly quickly through here. But I do believe vision is a really important part of any kind of leadership. One of the things, just a quick background to this from my own experience with this, when I came into my role, we'd gone through a lot of turmoil. Things were starting were not looking good and healthy for the school. And one of the things that we were told, based on the pattern of Bible schools and where things were going with Bible colleges, was that if you don't go to the city and if you don't become accredited, you're gonna die. And there was a couple problems with that. If you ever, most of you, has anybody been to Pamron here, other than Peter? Have you been to Pamron?
Well, we used to have the peace meeting there
Oh, okay.
3 or 4 times.
Okay, so it's literally in the middle of nowhere. And if you look at it, it's like a little oasis in this bald prairie, rolling hills. And it makes no conventional sense that this place should be going. And the only answer is that God has a plan and purpose for it. And so it didn't make sense, what are we supposed to do? And we prayed and we did research. This is the weird thing for me, because I wasn't naturally bent to think of vision. But when they asked me to do that interim role, and this had to be from the Lord because it was not my typical way of responding. he said, we have to start casting vision right now. We can't wait for a president to come in, because if we do, we're going to be done before we get a chance somebody to come and lead the visioning. And so together with the others in the team, we started to pray, God, what do you want Miller to be? And we just had peace that we were to stay with our roots, which was to teach the Bible and give young people or people who come a foundation, the Word of God, to equip them for wherever He leads them. Many of them, lots of them do go into vocational ministry. Majority end up in the secular workforce, and that they are grounded so they're equipped well, serve well in the church, and that we state that the Bible is going to be our main textbook. And we were just at peace with that, and once that was settled, now we know we're aiming. And ironically, many of the accredited schools have died, and for whatever reasons. But God saw fit to keep us going, and then it started to grow. But the vision was a pretty key part of that, and and we had to know what we were aiming for. And once we established that, it just sort of gives you a peace now what you're doing. I think these people have vision. I mean, I just, I've seen this firsthand in Africa. They're not deterred. They know what they have to get done. It may destroy their vehicle, but they're going to get there. And I see this visionary side. It just actually makes you laugh. I mean, their consciousness of safety things would make a safety officer probably pass out, because it's not safe. And this one, I love this one. Last time I was in Africa, I think it was, or maybe the second last, I saw a minivan with a rack, and they had 3 cows tied on that. How they got them up there, I have no idea. I know. Oh, they'll just, it needs to be done. They just get it done. But I like to equate that to what vision does. You know what needs to be done, you go for it. They have to get this cow to market. This is just, there's just a different way of thinking. This one looks like this truck could use a little help. Yes. Oh, is that right? Oh, man. They just... Oh, man. It looks like he's actually sitting in the back seat there. The one guy.
He's gone bananas.
Yep. Well, leaders must lead with vision and have a good sense of an envisioned future. Saunders says vision includes foresight as well as insight. Men of faith, for faith is vision. And we step into the unknown, asking God. And I think of you now, think in your own context, where you may have a voice in casting vision, or you're casting vision. What does God want us to do? How are we going to get there? Narrow it down so you know where you're heading. And in the late 90s, early 2000s, it seemed to be the way of thinking that you have to have all these purpose statements. You had to have a purpose statement, mission statement, a vision statement, and man, it was by the time you figured out what those are and you're trying to explain them to everybody, like, what's the point of this? So we narrowed ours down to one simple statement. This is what we believe our envisioned future is. So when a student comes to school, whether it's in Sunnybrae or Winnipeg or Pamberin, we want them to become passionate, relevant servants of Jesus Christ who are shaped by the entire Scriptures. And we've been asked to get involved with all kinds of different things. And sometimes it works. And you say, you know what? It fits our vision. And we'll do it because it fits our vision. We've had to say no lots. It's good stuff, but no, it's not really what it is. So I'll come to our vision statement in a moment, but it is one of the most effective tools that we have in drawing people together and leading forward. Proverbs 29:18a there, where there's no prophetic vision, people cast off restraint. Servant leaders must recognize that their responsibility and ability to cast vision for the people they lead is one of the most powerful tools at their disposal. Vision is your envisioned future, what you desire that future to look like. Vision is a picture of the future that produces passion. The enthusiasm inspired by vision results in some kind of a life product. And as I mentioned earlier, there's need for prayer, for wisdom, and direction from God. And this comes back to agenda, right? God, what do you want us to do? And once you establish that and you're at peace with it, then everything builds from that vision. So whether it's business or the church, and you know where you're heading, and it's simplified into a statement, then everything we do in the organization, everything that we do, whether the business or organizations, points to that, okay, how are we going to get there? How are we going to see this happen? So we won't, I'll just throw this question out here. We won't stop right now, but I do want you to wrestle with that question. What does casting vision look like in your current situation? It's a really important question. Jesus' vision, so the question is, did Jesus articulate his vision to his disciples? Do we know what Jesus' vision was? Was it clear? Very clear. Oh man, it was clear. Now, I don't think the disciples understood it at first. I think some of them were thinking he was going to set up an earthly kingdom. But they started to realize it got close to his crucifixion. This was something different. But his vision also was to establish a church, and that the church of Jesus Christ would grow and flourish someday to go to heaven with him. Matthew 28, the Great Commission, 1920. Go ye therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. That's a casting vision, right? I think Acts 1 verse 8, how does it go again?
Receive power after that, the Holy Ghost has come upon you, and you shall be witnesses unto me in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the uttermost part of the earth.
Yeah. Well, I think there it's laid out. I don't think there was a question when Jesus and the instructions to the new church, what they're supposed to do, was in question. And then the disciples picked it up and they went with it. And that became that provided the direction that everyone was taking. So maybe we should pause here for a minute. Why is it so important for leaders to recognize that casting vision is one of the most powerful tools? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you aim at nothing, you get nothing. Yeah. Any other thoughts on that?
Well, I often envision it like a plow with a whole bunch of horses. If we're all pulling different directions, we ain't going anywhere. But if we all pull one direction, we can get a lot of stuff plowed.
And you know, years ago, I'm really not a farmer, but I have driven a tractor a few times and been out with an old cockshut that didn't have power steering. And to try to keep a straight line, you know, I think there's an honor in being able to cultivate a straight line. And maybe people judge each other by how they're able to do that. I was so bad at that. But now you drive down and you see, man, GPS, you see these perfect lines. Somehow there's a picture of vision there because it's already pointing us in the direction we want to go, and it holds us there, right? I think there's something valuable about it. Instead of trying to figure how I'm going to get there because I don't know how to control this machine because the tires are moving all over the place. But vision, knowing where you're going, it's very helpful. And the impact, I believe, here is when your team knows the vision, you get buy-in. And if you got buy-in, boy, you're already well along the way. And Maxwell kind of alluded to that. You know, people know where you're heading, what you're wanting to accomplish. A vision statement, well, I think there's lots of descriptors for this, but for us, we use it as a one-sentence description about where you're heading, what your desired results are. So for our vision statement, like I said earlier, is to develop passionate, relevant servants of Jesus Christ who are shaped by the entire Scripture, and I require all the staff to be able to spew it out. Somebody asks you, what's our vision? Can you explain it? You have to be able to explain it. And for us here, I mean, every time you use words, they lack something. Words are weak, so you have to explain them. So when we see a student come, say, as a freshman, what we want to see and I've seen this so many times, when they get to graduation, I get to shake their hands when they're graduating, and I remember that person when they came as a freshman, he just went, oh, I'm not sure what's going to happen here. And then over 3 years, as the Word of God gets into their hearts, and they shape, and you see the maturity and the desire. They grow and they're passionate. They're passionate about Jesus. Relevant, I mean, they have the most relevant. We want to know this is the most relevant message you have. Now go out and share it well. Go out as servants of Jesus. Be servants at heart. Wherever you go, serve. But under the shape by the entire Scripture, so that you allow the full counsel of God to guide you. Not just a couple verses that I think I like in here and the rest I'm going to put aside. And so when we see that growth, you know, it's a bit subjective, but you can see evidence. You know, my grandpa used to say, he was an itinerant preacher, He said, we shouldn't be judgy or gentle people, but we can be fruit inspectors. And we should be fruit inspectors. And if there's no fruit, we have reason to say something about it. And when we see the fruit in the students, and it's not us, we just get to be part of the journey. And God's called us to invest and teach them. But it's the Word of God, the Spirit of God changing them, shaping them to become disciples of Jesus who will hopefully go out and be effective for Him. But that vision statement is something we come back to all the time. And when opportunities come, even when they asked us, would you consider starting school in Winnipeg? So we had to ask that very basic question. Does it fit our vision statement, given all the challenges that are involved with it? And after much prayer, we conclude, yes, it is. And you all face that, right? And so we can't do everything. But if your vision gives you guidance, if it's a church or a business or organization, or even as an individual, I think it's so helpful. Please add something if you want to this. What purpose does it serve? What is the role of the leader in vision? I think the leader's job is to make sure that their team is pointed that way. I think that's one of the most critical roles of the leader. You can't expect somebody else who doesn't necessarily have a leadership role to lead the way. You have to lead the way on this one. You have to keep bringing it back, reminding people. And the more I think the more your relationship and the trust you have with the people you lead, the depth, their capacity, their proven things, they're going to carry that with you. People will just do it automatically. But the leader has to make sure it happens.
Reminds me of an article that I once seen. The dad was telling his boys what to do. And he wasn't doing what the boys were supposed to do, but he was telling them what to do. And then one of the boys responds back to him and says, Dad, we can't hear you. Your actions are too loud.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. Yeah. Any other thoughts on this? Core values, again, those are conviction points. I don't know if you have core values in this church here. The value of core values, it just puts parameters on the hills you're going to die on. And we have 7 of them. And it just simply, they're not right or wrong things. They just simply say, this is what fits our ministry. And so when I interview somebody, I'm going to ask them, are these core values you're committed to? And again, if another organization has different, that's fine. It's not that. It's just that you need to be all in. So we have Bible teaching, we have missions, we have mentoring, we have family, we have servanthood, the local church are all core values. And so if somebody says, man, I love all of them, but I'm not going to teach the Bible, well, then I know where this conversation doesn't have to continue because we're in different pages. We require all of our staff to mentor somebody. And if they say, well, no, I don't feel like mentoring, well, then you need to be somewhere else because this is a core value for us. And it's a way just to make sure you get people of like-minded commitment. And so they're not something you worship, but they are very helpful in putting your parameters and how you even hire. I'm not going to look at this one here, the points, the institutional life cycle. You're probably familiar with that. It is in your packet there. You can study that if you want, or do you want to chat about it a little bit? This is a really typical cycle of what happens in an organization where you live and die if you don't correct things. Are you familiar with that, or do you want me to talk about it a little bit?
Let's talk about it.
Okay. I'll pull it. Here it is, right here. I don't have it. It's in this one here. So, and I'm going to just see if I can switch here and get a marker here. Here we go. I'll just show you. I'm gonna let you look at that, but I'll just diagram it this way. So you have that in the typical lifestyle of a business, a church, organization. I mean, it's pretty predictable. Honestly, it is. If you study history, this is pretty common what happens when something starts from infancy down here, and you go through the growing steps of growth, you start getting momentum, and things really get to a place where everything's stable and running well and going well. It can happen to church, it can happen to school like ours. So for us, probably what happened, we kind of, because of circumstances, we were probably getting pretty close to down here, very close to death. Just the way things had happened, just, it was just tough. But in this life cycle, this being the peak, this is the danger point. So when you evaluate a church or you evaluate where you're at, things are going well, things are stable, things are running really well. That's a really good place to be. But if we're not careful, we become complacent. And then complacency leads to it can be tradition, it can just be we've always done it this way, it's just okay, we're just gonna maintain, and instead of consider what needs to change, like what do we have to address to make sure we don't because the automatic things just start going downward. And you study, it's kind of bizarre, but it actually really plays out this way, I think. So it's called like the S curve, and it doesn't show on there, but right about this point, you really have to start another one. And renewal, making sure it's not like you have to reinvent everything new, but it's asking the good questions that you don't become caught in just maintaining what's working, because as a rule, it doesn't work for too long to maintain something that's working, because people are changing all the time. So just be alert. Are there some adjustments? You don't just change for the sake of change. It has to be purposeful. But it's this alertness that if we're not careful and we get comfortable and we just think, man, this is just going to stay like this now for all time, boy, that's generally not the way the pattern works. So you have to kind of assess where you're at. And I think God did something for us in this one, because we'd kind of been down here, so we're really starting a new cycle, and we start going up. After about 10 years, maybe, now it's more like 8 years, I guess, we had been able to we had the right staff, there was just a peace on campus, there was a competency, because we had done a lot of reorganizing, all that stuff that's just sort of typical. But in that, you can start getting comfortable. And I think God, in His goodness for us, brought the opportunity to start another campus. Instead of saying, man, let's just keep going. This is great. There's lots of students. And I think it rejuvenated us to rethink, because now we go to a different setting, and we have to rethink why we do what we do. I think it renewed us, and it kind of gave us a new charge, kind of this fresh start here to do that. I don't know, that's just my kind of looking at it, if I'm accurate on that. But I will say, wherever you are, guard against complacency, or this is the inevitable thing eventually which leads to death of an organization. And I still believe you pray for God's wisdom to see, help me to see, God, are we doing your agenda? What are we missing? Are we having to adjust some things? Our vision didn't change at all. We absolutely believe that we're where we're supposed to do that, but are you asking us to do other things that we are going to take a lot of work, they feel risky, but with lots of prayer and looking at it, God led us to do that. And that's just God doing His thing. We're just His servants, right, to do that. But these are practical things to pay attention to. And the life cycle kind of shows what the typical institutional life cycle will happen. Eventually you get senility and then death if you're not alert to these issues and questions. Does this make sense? Or okay, because is there anything you want to add to it that would help us, your experiences?
I've seen that kind of cycle both within missions as well as within the Bible colleges. And I believe that if we refuse to, because we are so successful, that just speeds up the process towards death. And evaluation and re-evaluation on a consistent basis, not every year, maybe. I
Yeah.
mean, there's a certain amount of that needs to happen every year. But where you take a major look,
Yeah.
and as a mission organization, we went through this, the first one almost killed us because we had refused to do it early enough. We were on this side of the curve rather than on the other side of the curve.
Yeah.
And it almost killed us. The second one was done about 10 years later, and there weren't a lot of huge changes. The third one, which happened just 4 years ago, that one brought us all the way back to the original purpose statement. We had lost that focus, and that original purpose statement came to the forefront. And that
Interesting.
was reaching unreached until the last one was reached. And that is our focus again. And what energy that gives.
I know.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
But I see that many of the schools, and you made reference that those who said we have to go into accreditation in order to survive. And that's all it is survival. It's not
Yeah.
growth. And we don't
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's just really good, Peter. You know, and one of the things we have to remind ourselves of when I heard a speaker share this, said when God said, Jesus never said, I'm going to build Bible colleges or mission organizations or, other things. So we can come and go because we have our season and maybe our season comes to an end, but he said, I'll build my church. That is a guarantee. Isn't that good to know? So sometimes we can hang on so desperately thinking we have to do this because we'll do everything to save an organization when maybe it's just God's season for you to close. And my prayer for Miller is, and I believe we have a place right now because I think it's obvious that God still has a place for us, that when our season comes, if it should come to an end, our purpose, that is because God just said, you've done your job, but not because we were idiots about it and we tried to force it. And I think, but we will always know that he'll build his church. And we're all involved of the church, aren't we? And he promises, I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Anyway, this is one, and maybe, I don't know exactly what this fits like for you. It's good questions. People can get comfortable, complacent, lose sight of what's happening in their world. One of our challenges right now is our current generation, this latest group that's come out since COVID. Many of them hadn't been in a classroom for 2 years. They was all online. And now they're sitting in the classroom, and we have some challenges. How they think, the influences of social media, and we have to really be praying for wisdom. How do we connect with these young people? There's a passion there, man, on these guys. I tell you, God gets a hold of them, watch out. But they're influenced by pressures that some of us would not be accustomed to. And so we need to pray for them, right? Pray that God will just grab hold of them. But we have to think about it in terms of what we're doing. And if we have to change some things, well, we've always done it this way. Well, maybe we have to change it to make sure we're connecting with them in the right way, because our world is changing. But a maintenance mindset is really deadly. Anyway, so just it's a really good food for thought. Of course, crisis is a great agent for change, isn't it? Boy, you want to change, boy, you get don't create a crisis though, so you get to change things. They come pretty naturally themselves, I think. So, I have this thing for leading meetings. Do you want me to run through it quickly, or just use it as a resource? I mean, I don't know if this is helpful to you. This is what we try to implement, partly because I think it's good to get some skills. I'm just going to move on. I don't think I need to go through it, but there's just how I think are helpful ways to lead a meeting. I think you've all been in many meetings, I assume that, and you've been in meetings that are led well, and they have a purpose, and you get to an end, and you stay within your time limit, but you still hear the good discussion. And there's those some, you never know, is this going to go 4 or 5 hours? Who knows? I don't know. Am I being nasty by saying that's just not good leadership?
Very truthful. Yes, we've all attended many meetings. Some are
Yep.
just frustrating to be there because it's a waste of time, because
Yeah.
there's nothing resolved. There's one thing that,
Yes.
And I know all those things.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
meetings is so important.
Yeah.
And make sure that they're productive.
Yeah.
Like you take notes, you follow up, who's in charge of this, who's in charge of that.
Yeah.
Next meeting, check. Did he do it?
Yeah.
Is it done? We have to table it for the next meeting again. So those things are all so important.
Okay.
It doesn't matter what setting it is.
Mhm.
Meetings are just to be productive. That is,
Yeah, and I assume anybody who's in leadership, you're just going to spend time in meetings. It's just part of it. And it keeps you on the same page. It helps you. And if we can learn and develop the skill of leading meetings well, you're going to help your team a lot. Because people like to know, oh, when this person's leading, I know we're going to be done on time. It's going to be, they're going to let people be heard, but we're going to get through. We know what we're going to accomplish. But it is a skill. So in our setting, I've discovered just because the person's the chairman or the director of a department, they're not necessarily good at chairing a meeting. So I'll take somebody else from that and say, they're really good at chairing. Let them chair. You work with the director. And these guys are happy with it because they know that's not really their strength. And let somebody else who can run a meeting well. So it doesn't have to be the leader always leading the meeting, especially if you struggle with that. Get somebody who's good at it. Just be on the same page and do it. So anyway, this is just a handout. You can, if it's helpful to you, I just submit it to you for a resource if it's helpful to you.
and so you know that the Queen has most of her meetings standing up. She used to.
Really?
Yes. So we have all my staff together 4 times a year. We don't sit down, we stand. If we sit down for a 2-hour meeting, if we all stand, it's 15 minutes.
Man.
But if everything's been discussed and decided on, good to go. It just makes it,
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's a really good idea. Yeah, and you won't fall asleep.
no,
Yeah, because if somebody's snoring, you want to.
Hard time doing it standing up.
Yeah, it's hard to do it standing up. Yep. All right, we're just about toward the end here. I'm gonna. This is. I want to wrap up with this one. We won't. I'm not going to take a lot of time, but I want to expound on these. And I mean, this is just some of the stuff. This is not all the stuff we face as leaders, but I identified 12 things that I think are pretty common that leaders face. And I'll just comment on them, but I want us to really wrestle with this as we kind of wrap up this class. And again, I invite your input. So the number one, I think one of the leadership issue is asking God to help us see how evil sin is. I think we can just diminish it and brush it off, and we don't think it's that big a deal. Or we just don't see it for how evil it is. If our minds are going a certain direction, it can be a multitude of things. And I believe it should be a common prayer, a regular prayer for us to ask God, please help me to see it for how bad it is. I maybe mentioned this earlier, but sin usually looks worse than somebody else. And when we're struggling with it, somehow it's just not as bad. It may be our thought life, it may be an attitude, it may be who knows what. And then we just need to say, God, help me to see this is sin for what it is. And I think there's just far too many leaders who have lost sight of this, and they forgot how bad sin is. And they start to accept it, and they let it become, and even if they're being productive, we talk about in some of the delusions that character does matter. So I encourage you, ask God to do this. I try to pray this often because I don't know if I'd use the word fear, but almost, that I'll lose sight. Said, boy, God, just help me see it for what it is, or I may start to just diminish that this is not a big deal, and I know where that's going to head. Secondly, dealing with jerks. I know none of you have ever dealt with this, but I've had it on occasion. Sometimes when you just have people who are just hard to get along with, right? And just people can treat you very poorly. It is part of leadership. It's what happens, and can be very unreasonable. Doesn't make sense. So how do you keep perspective? And last night, in my Bible characters, I gave sort of the answer to this. I believe is a critical answer is Jesus. when when Peter denied him just before he was crucified. And Jesus said, "You're going to deny me 3 times." Then he denies him 3 times in Luke chapter 22. And then, just as he denied him the 3rd time, the rooster crowed. And then Jesus turned and looked at Peter. And it just crushed him. And it wasn't Jesus saying, "You jerk, you stabbed me in the back after all I've invested in you." It must have been incredible compassion for this man who just stabbed him in the back. Because Peter just went away and wept. And the reality of what he'd done. I think Jesus modeled something for us there when we're wounded, when we're hurt, to stop and see them, as it says in 2 Corinthians. And this kind of puts a perspective on it. When somebody hurts us, we just see the monster in front of us, and we forget that this person was worthy of Christ's death. And in 2 Corinthians, there's a great verse there that helps us understand it. If you want to turn, I'll just read it to you if you want. But you can write the reference down if you want. 2 Corinthians 5. And it's talking about the ministry of reconciliation and how this looks. And then in verse 14 it says, "For the love of Christ controls us, because we have concluded that one has died for all, therefore all have died. And he died for all." So Christ died for all people. He died for all people. All that those who live might no longer live for themselves, but for him who for their sake died and was raised. And this is the challenge to us in context of how to see people through the eyes of Jesus. It says, "From now on, therefore, we regard no one according to the flesh, even though we once regarded Christ according to the flesh. We regard him thus no longer." When we look at people through the eyes of the flesh, we look through anger and bitterness and vindictiveness. And when we see through the eyes of Jesus, we see this person, even who's wounded us, is one worthy of Christ's death. Isn't that incredible? You know what? And early in my leadership, God just brought this home with me because I was struggling with a hard heart. I was getting hard toward people. I said, because I can be pretty callous if I'm not careful. And I didn't want to become that. I wanted to have that, that hippo skin, but soft underneath. And when I pause and say, "Remember, Jesus loved this person." And it was funny how this played out one day. I was in Dollarama or something, or store. And I'm walking down the store, and here comes this person walking, like just covered with tattoos and piercings, just like a walking pincushion. You know what my instinct was? To despise him. It was just like, how can you do that? And then this verse came. I was regarding him in the flesh. No longer regarding him in the flesh as one worthy of Christ's death. This guy was probably just screaming for somebody to love him and pay attention to him. So he's doing this manifestation external, just, will somebody care for me? You're trying to get attention, notice me. And I think, and then even when Jesus dealt with Zacchaeus, man, that little weasel, the people hated him, right? Because he's this little guy, he's ripping people off for their money, and they can't stand him. What does Jesus see? He said, "I'm going to come to your house. I'm going to come." He saw past the monster, and he saw someone, salvation came to Zacchaeus' home that day. We can do that, but we need God's help to do it because it's so hard to do it well. But I believe that's how we deal with people who are jerks to us.
Why did they become jerks?
What's that?
Why did they become jerks?
Why do they?
They quite often they hurt themselves.
Yeah.
Screaming for attention or whatever.
Yeah.
Something wrong.
Yep. And they become nasty.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we have to think there's almost always a big picture. Often when I hope I'm not boring you with examples from school, but it's kind of the context I'm working in. When a student is showing, behaving very well, we can jump to conclusions very quickly, too quickly. And we have to stop and go say, what's going on in your life? And suddenly you find out, man, there's just turmoil at home. and it's showing out in their body language. Instead of jumping, they don't care. So you're upset with them because they show they don't care. Find out. There's something behind it. Often they've been hurt themselves or they're struggling. Here's the codfish story. Have you ever heard this one? It's a great story. Do you have Have you read this? Okay. A number of years back, the codfish industry on the northeast coast of the USA had a problem. The fresher the fish, the better. So how could they keep codfish fresh while they transported them across the country? When they froze the fish, they lost too much flavor. When they transported them live in tanks filled with salt water, they got soft and mushy. Finally, they found a solution. They placed a catfish in the tanks. The catfish was a natural enemy of the codfish, so the catfish would chase them all around the tanks all the time while they were being transported. The codfish now arrived, the cod now arrived in better condition than ever. And then the story, Chuck Swindoll points out, we all need catfish in our lives. The difficult people or situations in life that may not be pleasant, but they keep us healthy and growing.
This Chuck Swindoll, he always sees the good with everything.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, good sense of humor. But isn't that true? I think sometimes I'm going to challenge you, and I'm saying this to myself. Let's thank God for the catfish, because they sharpen us. And even though they're frustrating, thank God for some of the people who push our buttons the wrong way. And just say, you know what, this has helped me to grow. And as leaders, we face this. But thing is, you can navigate through that, and you can come out really shining. If we don't see it just as, get out of my life, rather start seeing, once in a while this person helps me get it. And we can see the positive side instead of the negative side. Number 3, the dangers of accepts. I shared this in my Bible characters class. I'll just do the summary of this one. But in 1 Kings chapter 3, we're introduced to Solomon. He's just become the king. And he's taken over from a father who's had a very bloody history because God was using him to conquer many of the people. That was part of David's story. And then Solomon comes as the king. And very early, it says he followed in the footsteps of his father David. And God was pleased with him. But when you read 1 Kings, I'm just going to read those verses to you. 1 Kings chapter 3. We come to chapter 3, and I expanded this extensively in the Bible characters class. I'm just going to summarize it here. We read this. Solomon made a marriage alliance with Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. That was a no-no. He took Pharaoh's daughter, brought him into the city until he'd finished building his own house and the house of the Lord and the wall around Jerusalem. And the people were sacrificing in the high places, however, because no house had yet been built for the name of the Lord. They did that, but that was an excuse. They were not supposed to do that. And then it says, Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of his father David, only or except. He sacrificed, made offerings in high places. And I was at a certain message once where the pastor stopped. He wasn't even preaching on this per se. He just suddenly stopped and said, do any of you have accepts in your life? Because we get this glimpse into Solomon's life that everything was not right. He's following the Lord. It shows God's patience because he's pleased with them. He's working with them. He asks for wisdom, and he blesses with immense wealth, immense wisdom. But in that early stages, he's harboring things in his heart that eventually destroyed him. And his question was, do you have any accepts? And the point is to ask this question, God, are there things I'm harboring that are just festering that I'm not paying attention to, because if they get big, they will destroy. And with Solomon, his sad end, you get to chapter 11. He says his wives turned his heart away from God. He was offering to Moloch all these different deities that the heathens were. That's how far he'd gotten. Because, and I think there's really good reason to believe it started with him not dealing with this right away early. The lesson for us is ask God, are there things we are harboring in our lives that we have to be careful of? Bitterness, I illustrated bitterness because it's such a common thing. And when bitterness gets hold, and I used an axe, I don't have it here today, driving into a piece of wood. Every time that the axe is the offense, every time I harbor that thought, and I hit it, I'm driving it deeper and deeper. until it can destroy me. And how many of you are in the Bible characters class here? Okay, forgive me if I share this one illustration, but this proves to me why we have to early identify things. It can happen with pornography. You let that little glimpse becomes a bondage. How many people have been destroyed by the bondage of pornography? Because it maybe starts small, I'm just taking a little peek here. Before you know it, it can become full-blown bondage. And if we can realize I've got to stop it now, because it's harder to deal with it when it's in full stride. But I shared the story of this one lady on forgiveness. I had seen her about a year and a half ago. She's 92. In the early 80s, her daughter was murdered. She heard the murder on phone because her daughter phoned her, and then a man came into the house and killed her, and she heard the whole thing on the phone. And her little 2-year-old granddaughter was watching her mom get killed. And when she told me this, I knew the story, but she gave more details. She said after the man was convicted of first-degree murder, he was put in the penitentiary. And then she said, I went to the penitentiary to meet with him, and I forgave him. Just a beautiful picture of forgiveness. This is what she did. And when I drove away from there, this is what she said, I was free. I was free. The power of forgiveness. And I just feel there's so many things, gossip, lying, all these attitudes, bad attitudes for people, treating people poorly, you name it. When we realize that's in our hearts, we have to come to grips with it and say, God, help me see it and catch it now before it ruins me. Because like Solomon, we can be just like Solomon. Especially some of these things can be so enveloping and destroy us. And I believe when we ask God to show us these accepts, it's kind of a catchy word, just kind of helps my mind. Maybe it doesn't work for you. But when he said that question at that conference, he said, do you have any accepts? I've never forgot it. And we should learn from the life. And I think as leaders, we should be so diligently asking that question so that we maintain the character that's honoring to God. And God is so gracious in helping us deal with this in our lives. Remember, he's so gracious. He's so quick to forgive us when we repent. But I know when it becomes full-blown bondage, it's way harder. And how many people do we know who live, like, are you in right standing with everybody? Can you genuinely say, as a Christian, I should be. Can I be in right standing with everybody? And I have a business to do. I need to go take care of it. And we can brush that off and say, yeah, it's all okay. No, sometimes we have to have the guts to go say, I apologize, I wronged you. You can only do what you do. You can't force the other person to accept it. But you can do your part and genuinely make things right. So I think that's just a good one to remember. Number 4, the critical need of self-awareness. Without being unhealthily introspective, how well do you know yourself? We can't be the biggest stranger in our own life. And weirdly enough, some people are. They just have no concept who they are. That's not good for a leader and for anybody for that matter. I'm not talking about plumbing the depths to figure out everything. Some people can be so introspective, it actually is just not healthy. Because there's that place of just understanding God's forgiveness. Like knowing who you are, why we are. So I know, okay, I got to be careful here. But knowing God's forgiveness, that we don't dwell on the past and let it destroy us. I love what Paul says. Looking ahead, putting those things behind me, I press forward toward the mark of the high calling of Christ, because he's going to go to heaven. He could have dwelt on his past, couldn't he? All the stuff he did, but he stood in the peace of God's forgiveness. And in Bible characters, I just reinforce this. Isn't it amazing that when God forgives us, he does not remember our sins anymore? And Satan loves to come accuse us and bring up our past, say, you're still guilty. But if this is true, and it is, we stand forgiven when we've confessed and repented to him, and we start a new fresh start. And we keep striving to grow in our obedience. Isn't that awesome? That's a pretty amazing God. Eh? Our minds can't forget, but God does. I don't understand how it works, but the Bible's absolutely clear that he forgets our sins, he remembers no more. So, critical awareness, be alert to who you are. The dangers of trusting our personal perceptions of things too much. Here we go. Sometimes we can think we can make a judgment call so quickly, on a situation. Yeah, we could back that truck up a little bit and always know my perception is only partially right. I'm telling you, I think that's true every time of any kind of a complicated situation. You hear something, oh man, that's terrible, and you start ranting about it. Oh, back up here. You only know part of the story. Get to know as much as a leader, we need to learn as much about a situation before we start to deal with it, because we don't always get it all right, so we just have to be careful that we get the facts together. Number 6, the importance of leaving well. And I think I'm not sure where I think I shared this earlier today or yesterday, but just make sure that let's take the high road when we leave. And when it's time to move on from a ministry or work or whatever you're doing, that we leave well. How many disasters are there of people leaving poorly? And let's not do that. Let's leave well. Take the high road. And I think just knowing on when it's time to do it, and then take the high road. Sometimes it may be because it's your fault that you have to leave. Sometimes you may be falsely accused of something. Who knows what the scenario is, but we can always take the high road. And I think we have to intentionally gear our minds to that. When it's time to move on, don't think back, don't hold grudges, don't come back with baggage or things that, I've been keeping a little, I put a lot of, I'm going to speak for myself. I have it written in my Bible, actually. The longer you're in a ministry, the more the temptation to take more ownership than you don't own it anyway, or to be too attached to it. And to say, I put a lot of into this ministry. And they kind of owe me. No. You give your time and season for the Lord. And when it's time to go, because this is a big one, I think, the right perspective of ownership. Psalm 24, and then Deuteronomy also talks about this. We have to remember that God owns everything. We don't own it. We don't own anything. We're just caretakers. And we get that ownership mentality, boy, can that be destructive. And it can be the attitude of a leader toward ministry, like I was just saying. And I've watched people and tried to say, don't do that, because they hurt the ministry then, because they start to take things. I actually own this thing. I put so much into it. And it's often evident in founders of ministries where they put years and years into starting a ministry, and then they think it's theirs. No. It's ours, and we have to just let God go. I had a funny illustration with this, because I really believe this. I shock students when I tell them about this. Did you realize this is not yours? It's actually the Lord's. How are you going to use it? And so we're stewards only. So anyway, I can do renovations, but I don't get energized by them at all. And we were renting this house from the school. It's a little bungalow. And so we were able to buy it about 13 or 14 years ago, and then I spent the summer fixing it up. And it wasn't great joy to me, because I don't find renovations that exciting. You get them done, and at the end you say, I put a lot of sweat into this thing. And all of a sudden this weird thing happened. I gotta protect this. I've done this. What? And this thought, it was just like the Spirit of God just said, stop it right now. This is my house. So that, and it was good. It just killed it right there. So then when our kids came home, most of them are at the home by now, we wanted to model to them that we believe, we're just thankful. And it's, probably some people it's a shack, honestly. I just think, God, how do I get to live in a mansion like this? But it's yours. Thank you. And so when the kids came home, we sat around the table, and he said, we want you to join us. And thank God for the house we get to live in. And we're dedicating to the Lord for his honor and glory. It's his house. Now we'll take care of it as God's house, not ours. You know how freeing that is? And that should be with all our possessions, all our things. That it's his. Let's just take good care of it. And but that ownership wants to cut in so quickly, doesn't it? It's just a weird thing. And we just have to have a good attitude to our possessions. They're the Lord's. Having stuff or not having stuff, owning stuff is not the problem. It's our attitude toward it. So let's just honor God with it. And I think in the leadership thing, it really protects us from leaving poorly, from being a detriment to a ministry that we're, or a business, whatever we're part of, and being a good presence instead of a negative. Number 8, how do we apply godly discernment to guarding truth and doctrine and not fall into the trap of obsessive protection, which is actually a form of idolatry? I'm sure you're familiar with this, but sometimes people, in their desperation to guard the truth of the Scripture, or they get hung up on certain things, and it becomes an obsession to them. And when you talk to them, that's the only thing they can ever talk about. I had a family member like that, and you just couldn't get anywhere. He was into the social or the prosperity gospel type stuff, and you just couldn't talk about anything else. And Satan, to me, had him exactly where he wanted him. Completely obsessed with this and forgetting the bigger picture of living the Christian life. And I think we have to be on guard to guard the truth. By the way, do it collectively, together, help each other out. I love this about my context because we can't stay on top of everything, but we can help each other out. Hey, are you aware of this issue? Let's be careful. It's a new thing that's surfacing. Probably a doctrine that could be very damaging. We don't pick up everything, but we can do it together. But just keep it in balance. But if we get obsessed with certain things and then we just become consumed with it, honestly, it's a form of idolatry. And we have to be so careful because it just robs people of joy. If you remember the Emergent Church season, some of you remember the Emergent Church? It was kind of over the 90s and early. Now, I had people sending me like binders of stuff they'd taken off the internet. And they had legitimate concerns, but there was nothing. I don't think there's anything else in their minds except I got to defend God against the Emergent Church. Well, there were some concerning things that you had to really pay attention to, and we should. But we didn't have to consume our lives with it. And I think that's a trap, that extremism. So be guarded, but as leaders, we need to be balanced and watch for that we doesn't get too far either way. But we need to be good discernment, and we help each other. Does that make sense, or am I kind of weird here? Yes.
So, and I always say, don't make it an issue if it isn't an issue.
Yeah.
Like if you don't put your mind on it, it's not an issue.
Yeah.
So be it.
And I think that's where people have a hard time leaving it there because so the defense of the Scripture is essential, but we have to decide what are the real battlegrounds, right? Yeah. Sorry.
I was going to say, focus on the Word of God, focus on the truth.
Yeah.
All these other issues. When my wife worked at the bank, and counterfeit money was a thing.
Yeah.
And they didn't study the counterfeit, whatever it was. They studied the real money.
Yeah, great role.
Recognized the real money, and then they would recognize.
Yeah. That's a great example.
I think that's how it is with the Word.
Oh yeah, nice.
We have that example in the Word too, because that's what John does in 1 John, when he totally defends the gospel with just simply sharing the truth. He never mentions the Gnostics, he doesn't mention the false teacher, he doesn't mention any of the things that they stand for. He simply says, this is truth.
Yeah.
And so does Paul when he writes the epistles.
Yeah. Very, very.
That's our defense.
You're right. I agree. Yes, Jack.
It's one thing to be alert for this, that we don't fall into this trap. I think we need to be careful. Or those that have been caught in some movement or teaching.
Yeah.
But the other thing is how do we deal with someone that has this in a church, for example, that has this one force that you want to follow all day long every time you meet and causing division. How do we deal with that issue or that person?
I've experienced it because I know people like that, so I totally get it. And I've had somebody else mention the same thing. And I don't know. You know what? It just feels like it's a lost cause. Because once they're on their bandwagon, and I think it's just best to say, until you are willing to listen to truth, it's really hard to converse with people like that because they'll obsess over a topic and it just goes there and it stays there. And it's that imbalance. So I think you pointed back to the truth, like you said. But in the case, my relative, there was nothing would convince him. And it was like, you know what, then I just have to leave it in God's hands, because I know nothing I say is going to convince him anyway. But it's frustrating and if they become a negative influence in the church, I think it becomes a place of church discipline. Now, I showed you these books here. This is being alert, because this keeps us on top of some of the things that could really be damaging. But we don't have to obsess about this. Let's just be educated, let's be aware, and deal with it when it comes. Like, these are books that help us with that. But I think it's that balance, right? And it's still, this is the best place to go. And I think people just, I don't know what it is, but I think Satan has a heyday trapping people with extremism. And even if it's a good cause, sometimes the cause becomes idolatry.
Sometimes the topic is the Bible, King James only.
Yeah, exactly. That's another, exactly.
But I think it's very true what you said. Sometimes it's a lost cause.
Yeah.
Around that whole thing.
Yeah.
You can't turn things around.
No.
You can't stop reasoning.
And I feel sorry for people like that, because what I see is people completely robbed of the joy of the gospel. Instead of enjoying the Christian life, they have a bandwagon they want to proclaim. I said, back up and enjoy the peace of the gospel God's given you. Yes, we have to be discerning. The Bible tells us to be discerning and careful and guard against these doctrines. That's part of our responsibility. But God also has big shoulders. Sometimes we think we have to protect him. I think God's quite capable of protecting himself. Thank you. That's great input. Oh, the velvet brick here. I have a book that's called Hell Yes. And it sounds like it's a cuss word at first, but actually it's a book where the person says, he's saying, yes, yes, there is a hell. And then he talks about different issues. But then he talks about the velvet brick. And he says, when you're speaking the truth, he was a debater, and somebody asked him, said, so what are you talking about now? He said, well, he says, I'm going to be debating and defending this truth of Scripture in some kind of a TV interview. And the guy said, you know about the velvet brick? And he says, it's basically speaking the truth in love. Because you can get so almost vicious and hammering people who disagree with the brick. You put a gentleness around it. Speak with gentleness. It's way more effective. Could persuade people of the truth rather than try to beat it into them. I think it's really good wisdom. Confronting the sin of entitlement, really important one. And it goes back to the gospel, and it's recognizing the only thing I truly deserve is damnation, but for God's wonderful grace. And that idea that I'm entitled to this, I deserve all these good things from God, you owe it to me. You owe me a good family, you owe me a good house, you owe me all this stuff, because I just have it coming to me. And no, we don't. And it's just God's grace and goodness to us that we have the things that we have. And so we need to thank him for that he lavishes his grace on us way more than we deserve, and we are given salvation because of his wonderful grace. Number 10, the importance of courageous leadership. Are you a courageous leader? What does this look like? Well, sometimes it takes courage to do the right thing. I don't know if you confront this, but I believe a courageous leader, you don't do things because it's popular. You make a decision because it's right. And when you evaluate a situation, we know in our hearts this is right. You make the decision based on it, not on the backlash you might get. And I'm sure you've all faced that. So let's be courageous. Again, the importance of a leader having a panoramic perspective. I think one of the things that leaders have to be careful is not get caught up in minutia, but keep the big picture in mind. That's what a good leader does. They see the bigger picture all the time, and it helps them to get the people they're following, because those minutia can distract us from what's important. The last one is hiring well. We kind of heard that from Maxwell here, but we need great wisdom in hiring. If you're leading and your part of your role is hiring people, hire the right people. And sometimes it's better not to have anybody than to have the wrong person. And so we need much wisdom. And I gave you kind of there's a thing there that we're going to use for hiring to assess people in the questions that we ask, and it's in your handout there. But I think it's something we have to make sure. One of the interesting things, because I've done lots of hiring, that I've really turned to, is it called a gut feeling, or is it spirit-led, or both probably, is when you talk to somebody, it doesn't take very long at all, maybe it's because I've done it quite a bit, to pick up a tone and say, something's off here. It's a weird thing. You want to give the person full benefit of getting the job, if that's what, but you start sensing something, and then the other times, oh man, I can seize this person's heart, and this is the type of person we want. I don't know how you hire, but we need to do it well. All right. I don't want to be controversial. We can talk about COVID-19 regulations, but that was a leadership journey all of its own, right? But we don't have 3 weeks, so we'll just leave it there. No. I'm going to wrap it up unless you have any other questions. I think we're done. I want to just close with a few quotes. There's a list of additional leadership advice. It's in your resources. You can look through that. These are accumulated, they're repeats, they're reviewing. There's some good stuff there that I think is worthy to read that I've collected from various people, because I've had, just even here, just the things I've learned from talking with you. So good. So I'm going to close with this. This is a mixture of humor, good quotes to think about as we close this course. And some were just plain silly. Let's wrap up with this, but some was really good. Great leaders are always great simplifiers. That's a really powerful thing. You simplify an issue. You simplify, get to the heart of the issue. And I think good leaders can do that. This is a great one. Sometimes leadership is planting trees under whose shade you'll never sit. Not right? You don't want to see the benefits of what your work. But somebody else was, that's okay. I think that happens a lot. A great one. I like this one, Margaret Thatcher. Being powerful is like being a lady. If you have to tell people you are, you aren't. Expecting people to treat you fairly when you're good is like expecting a bull not to charge you because you're a vegetarian. Oh boy. The best leaders are able to cut through the clutter and keep the main thing, kind of what the top one said. This is coming from an agnostic, Mark Twain. Just listen to this statement on forgiveness. It is absolutely stunning. Forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it. Man, ponder that. How did he come up with this? If you know Mark Twain, this is he really came up with a lot of good quotes, but how does this come out of an agnostic's mouth? Isn't that true? So true. It's a beautiful statement. Beautiful statement. Only a mediocre person is always at his best. Oh, man. Apathy. This is another good one. Apathy is the glove into which evil slips its hand. And boy, apathetic people are not really pleasant to see or be around, are they? And out of it comes evil. Another important one, when something important is going on, silence is a lie. There's a time and place to speak. Now this is probably my generational humor here. Our students would not get this. They say, that's just rude. No, it's funny. Can I tell you this is funny? We're just laughing at ourselves here, but tell me everything you know. I have a few minutes to waste. I'm discovering with these, what are they, Gen Z or whatever, but come on, you guys, it's okay to laugh at each other, seriously. You don't have to be so prim and proper. Just enjoy laughing at each other, for crying out loud. Oh, wow. This came from my mom. I like this one. On speaking and preaching, if you don't strike oil in 20 minutes, quit boring, or stop boring. That's it. One runs differently who's seen a lion than one who is not. Never measure God's unlimited power by your limited expectations. There's another one on lions. It's an Ethiopian proverb that says, a lion chased me up the tree. and I greatly enjoyed the view. Just think of the implications that would. Oh, man. Our circumstances chase us up so we can enjoy the Lord instead of trying to just panic, right? I don't know. I think this is enough. I think we've covered enough. You guys have been troopers. I really appreciate it. Like my prayer from the beginning, ever since I was aware of this course, I just said, Lord, just help it to be applicable, help it to be beneficial. Only your Spirit can actually do that and work in people's lives and bring that. I hope this isn't just information. I've tried to draw it down into the heart. And please understand, I am speaking to myself when I do this. I've taught this in various forms many times. And I just keep hearing it because I fully believe in what we're talking about here. And now God help me to live it consistently. And I hope as you've experienced this that you'll be able to, this will help you in your leadership. It'll encourage you in your leadership. And that certain things will really driven deep. And if it takes a matter of referring to things, you have the resources to refer to. Maybe you're wondering about something. Hopefully these resources have somewhat helped you. But I do believe as I've prayed about it, I trust God has blessed you in some way through this course. So thank you for your input. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Continue serving the Lord faithfully. In my Bible characters course, I'm going to conclude with this tonight. I'm going to watch a little clip to wrap it up, but it ends with this statement of these young people who just truly lived what it means to follow Jesus. And the speaker says, you know what their problem was? Jesus. Is there any greater compliment for somebody to say your problem's Jesus? That's why you act the way you act. I can't think of a higher compliment. And that's how we'll wrap up my course tonight with Bible characters. And that's my encouragement to you. Let people see Jesus in us and how we serve. I'll pray, and then I think we'll say it's good. Dear Lord, I thank you for this time we can spend together. And we just truly come to you asking your Spirit to speak to us, each of us here. Each one here has responsibilities, lots of responsibilities, and you've called them to do different things. Each role I know here is unique, but you precisely have determined it that way. And I pray that we will truly model what it means to be a leader who led like Jesus led. He was a servant leader. He modeled it to us. Help us to do this well, because I know it'll bring you honor and glory if we do so. Bless and watch over each one here, each of their families, their situations. All of that I give to you and ask for your protection and care. In Jesus' name, amen. And that's it. Thank you.
All we